Hello friends, welcome back to my channel Learn India 24 by 7. So friends, in this video, let's discuss and understand on below topics. So let's begin. BPM is the discipline in which people uses various methods to discover, model, analyze, measure, improve, optimize, and automate business processes. Whereas a business process is a series of steps performed by a group of stakeholders to achieve a concrete goal. Each step in a business process denotes a task assigned to a particular stakeholder. Now let's discuss and understand about commonly found business processes in any organization. Say for example, order to cash process. Order to cash process performed by vendor. It starts when a customer submits an order to purchase a product or service. And order to cash process ends when the product or services has been delivered to a customer and customer has made the payment for the same. Now let's understand in brief about the process quote to order. Quote to order process starts from the point when a supplier receives a request for quote from a customer and ends when the customer in question places a purchase order based on the quote received. The combination of quote to order and corresponding order to cash process is called quote to cash process. Procure to pay process starts when someone in an organization determines that a given product or service needs to be purchased, and it ends when the product or services are delivered and are paid. Procure to pay process includes activities such as obtaining quotes, approving the purchase, selecting a supplier, issuing a purchase order, receiving the goods or service, and finally checking and paying the invoice. For every procure to pay process, there is a corresponding quote to cash process on supplier side. The process issue to resolution starts when customer raises a problem or issue such as complaint related to defects in a product or an issue encountered when using a service. And the process continues until the customer, the supplier, or preferably both of them agrees that the issue has been resolved. The process application to approval starts when someone applies for a benefit or privilege and ends when the benefit or privilege in questions are either granted or rejected. These type of processes are common in government agencies. For example, when citizens apply for building permit or when entrepreneurs apply for business license. The business processes are what companies do whenever they deliver a service or product to customers. The way processes are designed and performed impact both the quality of service that customer perceives and the efficiency with which services are delivered. An organization can outperform another organization offering similar kind of services if it has better processes and executes them in a better way. This is true not only for customer facing processes but also for internal processes such as P2P process, which is performed for the purpose of fulfilling an internal requirement. So friends, let's understand about one example. The company Build IT is a construction company specialized in public works such as roads, bridges, pipeline, tunnels, and railroad services. Within Build IT, site engineers need a piece of equipment such as truck, excavator, a bulldozer, and a water pump, etc. Build IT as a company owns very little equipment and instead it rents most of its equipment from specific vendors. When site engineers need to rent a piece of equipment, the equipment rental request form is filled and the request is sent by mail to one of the clerks at company's depot. The clerk at the depot receives the request and after consulting the catalog of equipment suppliers, select the most cost-effective equipment that complies with the request. So further, the clerk at the depot checks the availability of selected equipment with the supplier through phone or mail. So in case if the selected option is not available, then the clerk has to select an alternative piece of equipment and check its availability with the corresponding supplier. After finding a suitable and available piece of equipment, the clerk at the depot adds the detail of the equipment to the rental request. Each rental request has to be approved by work engineer who also works at the depot. In some cases, the works engineer rejects the request, and some rejection lead to the cancellation of the request. Other rejections are resolved by replacing the selected equipment with another equipment such as cheaper or more appropriate piece of equipment. When works engineer approves the rental request, the clerk sends a confirmation to the supplier along with purchase order. The purchase order is produced by Build IT's financial information system. The company's clerk also records the equipment rental request in a spreadsheet that is used to monitor all ongoing equipment rental requests. In the meantime, the site engineer may decide that equipment is no longer needed. Then he asks the clerk to cancel the request. In due course of time, the supplier delivers the rented equipment to the construction site and further site engineer inspects the equipment. If everything is in order, the site engineer accepts the rental equipment. In some cases, the equipment is sent back as it does not comply with the requirement of site engineer. So in this case, the site engineer has to start the rental process all over again. When the rental period expires, the supplier comes to pick up the equipment at the site. So sometimes the site engineer asks for extension of rental period by contacting the supplier via mail or phone 1 or 2 days before pickup of the equipment. Subsequently, the supplier may accept or reject this request. So few days after the equipment is picked up, the equipment supplier sends an invoice to the clerk by mail. So at this point of time, the clerk asked the site engineer to confirm that the equipment was indeed rented for the period mentioned in the invoice. And the clerk also checks if rental prices indicated in the invoice are in accordance with the purchase order. After checking prices against the equipment used, the clerk forwards the invoice to financial department, and finally the financial department pays the invoice. As seen in the previous example, any business process consists of number of events and activities. And the arrival of piece of equipment at construction site is an event, and this event might trigger the execution of series of activities. When an activity is rather simple and can be seen as one single unit of work, then we call it as a task. For example, if the equipment inspection is simple, just checking that the equipment received corresponds to what was ordered, then we can say it as a task. Say for example, checking that equipment fulfills the specification as per purchase order. The equipment is in working order. The equipment comes with all required accessories and safety devices. Then we call it as an activity instead of task. So, in addition to the events and activity, a typical business process also includes decision points where decision made that affects the way process is executed further. For example, as a result of inspection, the site engineer may decide that the equipment should be returned or should be accepted for use. A typical business process also includes actors such as human actors, organizational or software systems acting on behalf of human actors, and physical objects such as equipments, material, products, paper, documents, and informational objects such as electronic documents and electronic records. Say, for example, the equipment rental process involves three human actors, namely clerk, site engineer, and works engineer, and two organizational actors, build IT and equipment supplier. The business process also involves the physical objects, the rented equipment, and electronic documents like rental requests, POs, invoices, and electronic records. So actors can be internal or external. The internal actors operates well within the organization where the business process is executed. In the current case of example, the clerk, the site engineer, and the works engineer are the process participants. On the other hand, the equipment supplier is an external actor. Contrary to internal actors, The external actors operates outside the organization. In the current example, the equipment supplier is an external actor. The execution of business process leads to one or several outcomes. In the current case, the equipment rental process leads to a piece of equipment being used by Build IT and payment is being made to the equipment supplier. Ideally, an outcome should deliver a value to the actors involved in the business process. In this case, the actors involved are Build IT and the equipment supplier. In some cases, no value is delivered or only partial value is delivered. In the current example, when piece of equipment is returned, no value is gained neither by Build IT nor by the supplier. This corresponds to a negative outcome as opposed to a positive outcome that delivers value to the actors involved. Among the actors involved in a business process, the one who consumes the output of a business process is called as a customer. In the current example, the customer is the site engineer, since the site engineer puts the rented equipment for the use. It is also the site engineer who is dissatisfied if the outcome of the process is not up to the mark, or if the execution of the business process is delayed. In this case, the customer is an employee of the organization, hence it is an internal customer. In other processes such as order to cash process, the customer is external to the organization. Many times there are multiple customers in a business process. For example, in a process for selling a house, there is a buyer, seller, a real estate agent, one or more mortgage agents, and at least one notary. The outcome of the business process is a sales transaction which provides value to both buyers and to the seller. So, in this case, both the buyer and seller are the customers